Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Brooke and this is Pages of Blessings. Okay, I am coming to you today with my November reading wrap up. November was Historathon and also Nonfiction November, all of which I tried to participate in, and I don't want to say I failed, but I think I got to half of what was on my TBR, about half. I read 6 books this month, one of which wasn't even on my TBR, so I guess a little bit less than half of my TBR got read, but I read 2 relatively thick, two pretty, decent size, so I'm pretty proud of myself. And it was just a month of being busy with the holidays approaching, and then my son was sick for about 2 weeks. So we were just all kind of like in a funk. Our routine was just not what it usually is, and that happens. So I'm pretty happy with the 6 books that I read, and I can't wait to share my thoughts. I'm just gonna go in order of how I read them. So first up, I read the group read for Historathon, which is Ellen Marie Wiseman's The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. Man, I'm sorry if the lighting is just like everywhere I was going today. I was either overexposed or underexposed. It's a gloomy day, so I'm sitting in front of a window trying to make it work. So if you can't, looks like there might be a little bit of a glare, but thank you for bearing with me. So this one I actually gave 4 stars to. I really enjoyed this one. It was more of a thriller than what I was anticipating, and it was super fast paced. I don't really know what I was thinking it was going to be about when I went into it, but it was completely not at all it surprised me. And so I think that's why I rated it so high. It follows our main character, Sage, and she has a twin sister, Rosemary, who she believes to be dead from pneumonia from 6 years prior. We find out right in the beginning of the book that Rosemary isn't dead. She's actually been at Willowbrook State School this whole time. And so Sage sets out to find her sister and reconnect with her, only to find that Rosemary has now gone missing from Willowbrook. And Sage then gets mistaken for Rosemary when she goes to Willowbrook, and we view what happens to her from that point forward, and that thriller aspect of what happened to Rosemary, and then also like Sage being believed that she's not Rosemary. That was what I was most the thriller for me was more of like that. The more she tried to say that she wasn't Rosemary, the more you thought she was crazy. So like almost like a psychological thriller in that regard. But it was really good. I know there's like a mixed bag of there's mixed reviews. I watched the live stream that Amanda from the Color Reader did with Lindsay and Gloria, who were the hosts for Historathon, and they talked about this, and I know this was not Gloria's favorite book. I think she gave it 2 stars. I appreciated the information about Willowbrook because Willowbrook was a real place and it was a really devastating place. So I appreciated all that information. You do have to suspend your belief a little bit to make the leaps of what is actually happening, but I knew the main story was fictional, so I didn't mind a little bit of kind of like it not being super realistic. I was more invested in the thriller aspect and finding out what happened to Rosemary and all of that. So I recommend picking it up. I am definitely looking for more historical thrillers. Gloria had one that she just read and she really liked it. I'll leave it linked below what the title is, or I'll put it right here. I think it was called The Unbroken, something like that. Once I find it, I'll include it here in the video, but I honestly might check that out for January because I really enjoyed the pace of this, but also getting that information of the historical settings. So that was Lost Girls of Willowbrook. Next, I picked up a nonfiction, Live Your Truth and Other Lies, Exposing Popular Deceptions That Make Us Anxious, Exhausted, and Self-Obsessed. This is by Alisa Childers, and I watch her podcast pretty regularly. I read her her first book, which is called Another Gospel. I really enjoyed this. I don't know if you can see, I tabbed pretty much and highlighted all throughout. I gave this also 4 stars. The reason it wasn't a 5-star for me was a lot of what was in here I feel like she's had conversations about on her podcast, so it didn't quite seem like new information. It seemed like everything she's been researching and talking to other people about on her podcast kind of composed in a book. So that for me, that was why it dropped down to only 4 rather than 5, but it is full of really great information and tips and help to dissect the current cultural lies, to spot them, how to approach that, how to engage with people who are believing them. So like I said, it was full of highlights, full of tabs. I really recommend it. I recommend her podcast and her first book, Another Gospel. Next up, I read Kristin Hannah's The Nightingale. And oh my gosh, I had to sit with this one for a couple days before I could write my review on Goodreads. And I kept going back and forth on like what I wanted to rate it. I think I first rated it a 4-star, and then I went back and was like, no, it's more like 4.5. And then now that I've sat with it, I changed my mind, and it is a 5-star for me because I keep thinking about it. And unfortunately, when you have a book that is so well known, and I feel like there's like over 1 million reviews on Goodreads, or it was crazy. I saw the number and I was like, there's that many people that read this book. And I think you can get influenced by other people's takes on books, especially this one also has some mixed reviews. People who know this era of France tend to not rate it as highly. It's people have said it's not a great representation of France in that time, but it is based on a true plot line, and I just really enjoyed how Kristin Hannah weaved everything together. So we follow a pair of sisters. We have Vianne and Isabel. We learn right away that their mother had passed away, and after that their father kind of didn't have any interest in being a father anymore. He had fought in the First War, and this follows World War II, so he was in World War I, and he has some baggage from that and just decides that he's going to check out, and they kind of go, and they both kind of deal with that grief differently, which then sets their lives in kind of 2 opposite trajectories. And then present day in the book is, 1939, so we basically follow both of them from the start of the war to the end of the war, and just how they both deal with that. It's so hard. I feel like you can't say too much because everything is woven together so beautifully. And in the beginning, to be honest, I preferred Isabel's timeline, like Isabel's story. I kind of dreaded whenever she went back to Vianne, but by the end, I was a fan of both. And it was just a beautiful illustration of loss and dealing with opposition and poverty and sickness, so much. So I'll give a little synopsis of each timeline, and then that's all I'm going to say because I think you have to read it if you haven't read it. I mean, I'm probably the last one to read this book, but if you also haven't read it and you enjoy historical fiction, especially World War II, I would suggest it, but also knowing that it's not the greatest representation of accurate events. It is based on the true story of a woman who helped take fallen pilots, so pilots whose planes were bombed down in France, and they were of the Allies, so usually like American or British airmen, and hide them and keep them from the German soldiers and get them safely into Spain. And by crossing the what's the name of the mountains? I'll put the name of the mountains right here, but it's a mountain range that she had to cross and was part of help crossing to get these men to safety. And that is actually in the book. That's a main storyline in here. That's pretty much Isabel's main storyline, and that was true. So I really appreciated learning about that. Vianne, however, her husband is drafted into the war. She has a daughter, Sophie, and it's all about them living at home and in France while they're at war, and then they slowly see the soldiers come in, and the soldiers take over, and a German soldier shows up at her house and basically tells her either you can leave or you allow me to live, like regardless, I'm living here and you have the choice to stay and continue to live here with me, or you can leave. And so this house had been in her family for generations, so she had no intentions of leaving. So her and her daughter are now living with a German soldier, and what all that looks like. And through the book, Vianne finds her voice and finds her inner strength to get through the war and to fight on behalf of France in even the smallest ways that she knows how. I think that's all I'm going to say about this. Again, it's a 5-star. I had to sit with it for a while and really think about like how it impacted me, it made me feel, and my experience reading it. And for me, it was a 5-star read. one of my favorite World War II. Okay, next, I do not have a physical copy, but I'll put it right here. I read, oh gosh, I think it's called Kind is the New Classy. Kind is Classy, Kind is the New Classy. Oh, you'll see it right here, but it's by Candace Bure. And so if you don't know who she is, she played DJ in Fuller House. And she's been in the news a lot lately, and I really wanted to check this one out. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars. To me, it was more, I read a lot of like apologetics books and kind of deeper, like, I don't want to say this wasn't deep. I mean, it wasn't that deep. There's a lot of Christian morals, and she talked about God a lot and had Bible verse references and talked about her faith throughout the entire book, which I loved. But I feel like it stayed pretty surface level, and it's pretty approachable for, like, I would say newer Christians or those who maybe aren't Christians could pick it up if they're not minded by all the Bible references. I just didn't feel like it went super deep. I think there was a lot of great applicable lessons and ways that we can show kindness as Christians and what that looks like. I mean, she went into very like real life examples of like writing people letters or inviting people over for a dinner party and what that can look like and how to do it on a budget. But it just wasn't deep enough for me to be like, oh, this was like earth-changing or like a life-altering book. Probably won't read it again. But again, there was really some great applicable things. I also didn't love that she did not define any of her terms. So she said like God is love a lot, and she would use the words like kindness, goodness, love, and nothing was defined. And coming from like reading books like Lisa Childers, where she talks about linguistic theft and how our words have been hijacked and their meanings have been changed, and so you can have a conversation with somebody, you can be saying love, they can be saying love, but you're talking about two different things because you have two different definitions. I would have preferred her to define her terms just so we knew what she was talking about, even if she just pointed to the biblical definitions, or I just think it would have helped clarify and solidify her stances. I know where she was coming from as a Christian, but somebody who maybe doesn't have a strong biblical foundation or isn't a Christian might take the current culture's definitions of those words and make her words mean something that she didn't intend. Okay, so my 5th book that I read was Suzanne. This is Susan Woods Fisher's Moonlight School. This was again, read it for Historathon, so it's historical fiction, but based on the real story of Cora Wilson Stewart. That's her name. Cora Wilson Stewart is a real person. This book definitely made me want to read more about her and her involvement with starting the Moonlight Schools. It takes place in about 1911 in Rowan County, Kentucky. We follow Lucy Wilson, and early on we learn that her sister went missing many years prior. Her sister was only 2 years old when she completely vanished, and they haven't been able to find her since, and how that moment impacted Lucy's life. And she's kind of at a point where she needs to decide which way she's going to go. She's kind of at a crossroads, and this opportunity presents itself to go help her cousin, who was elected the first female superintendent of Rowan County Schools, and she's offered to go spend 6 months with her to be her assistant and help her in her work, and she agrees to go. This takes her into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains and dealing with people who live a lot differently. She comes from living in the city, and now we're dealing with, they use the phrase mountain people, and how they have different, their speech is different, their words are different, they're speaking English, but doesn't quite sound like English to her. The way that they like their hygiene and just their amenities and finances all look completely different than what she is used to. But this follows Lucy's just adjustment, her finding herself, but then also her falling in love with these mountain people and really coming alongside of them and fighting for fairness. And it eventually leads to Lucy and Cora starting the Moonlight Schools, which was a school. They opened up all the schools in Rowan County to the adults at night on moonlit nights for them to learn to read and write. So it was a big focus on literacy, the importance of literacy, quality of literacy, what that does for a person, like how that can bring freedom and financial independence just by knowing how to read and write, and the downfalls if they don't know how easily they are taken advantage of. So again, this is the Moonlight School. I really liked it. I would say it was only a 4-star read because I would have liked more information in here about the schools. Felt like that kind of got wrapped up really quickly at the end, and it was more focused on Lucy and her relationships than necessarily the Moonlight schools. And then also there's a little bit of something is revealed towards the end, and I called it like one of the first third of the book. I was like, oh, this is definitely where this is going, and I was right. So kind of, I don't know, just because I could see it coming, it kind of ruined it for me. But again, I would recommend it, especially checking more about Cora Stewart Wilson. Now, my last book, The Voice of the Wind. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm not going to be able to say a lot because I'm still processing. Only finished it a couple days ago. If this is any indication, you know, of how I enjoyed it. I knew I was going to write in it. I knew I was going to tap it up. I was underlining, circling, just so many great lines to ponder and to think about and to just turn to the Bible over. So if you are unfamiliar with The Voice in the Wind by Francine Rivers, this follows our main character, Hadassah, and she is living during the time, so it's post-Jesus, but it's like early church days. And we're following her after the fall of Jerusalem. And through the fall of Jerusalem to the Roman Empire, she is taken as a slave, and she serves a family. And we follow her story in Rome and just what it looks like to be a Christian. She's hiding the fact that she's a Christian from even Jewish slaves, because it's so, like, Christians were being killed all the time just for saying that they were a Christian, refusing to bend a knee to the Roman Empire. And it was just a very dangerous time to be alive, especially for the early church. And we follow her and her family that she serves. The two main people that she serves is Marcus and Julia. They're the children of the family, but they're older. They're like, Julia's more her age and Marcus is a few years older. And just watching the dynamic between them, like how they live their life, the things that they live for, how they define happiness, and how Hadassah does, and just that juxtaposition throughout the whole book, and just how she serves so faithfully. And it's said multiple times about how, like, they compare her to other slaves and how other slaves serve out of obligation, but she serves from a place of actually wanting to serve and out of love, and they can genuinely see that she cares for them. And so that makes her like a very valued slave in her house. And there's so many different plot points and places that this book goes, and different characters. I just I cannot wait to start the second one, and I highly recommend this one. I can't believe it took me so long to read it, but I really loved it. 5 stars. So that's it for my read. So I had 1 3.5 star, 3 4 stars, and 2 5 stars. So a pretty good month for me. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.